Bitcoin, blockchain, ICOs, Ethereum, and all the rest. Are cryptocurrencies the 21st century unicorn, a speculative bubble, or the future of money? The CryptoCast will help you understand the rise, the fall of digital currency, the highs, the highlights, the potential, and the lows, the scams, and pitfalls. I'm your host, Jason Hartman, and we'll talk with some of the biggest names in the space. CryptoCast is your resource for all things crypto. Let's go. It's my pleasure to welcome Paul L. Williams. He is a retired professor of humanities and philosophy and a consultant to the FBI. He's the author of, I believe, 15 books, and his latest is The Killing of Uncle Sam, The Demise of the United States of America. Paul, welcome. How are you?
I'm doing great, Jason. Thank you.
Good to have you on. Where are you located?
I'm located in, the correct word would be Oxter. In the Oxford Dictionary, that means the armpit of the United States. I live right outside of Scranton, Pennsylvania.
Got it.
Which is a place filled with toxic landfills and toxic Irishmen like myself.
Well, funny guy. Well, that is the former Rust Belt, but I will be in Philadelphia next week doing a conference there. So,
that's about I'm 2.5 hours away from Philadelphia, so you're safe down there.
Good stuff. So what is the thesis? I mean, killing Uncle Sam, there's a lot of talk about, the end of America and the end of the dollar as the global reserve currency and all of these problems we have. But I agree with, a lot of that, but I got to ask, just compared to what? I mean, it seems like so many countries are so messed up nowadays. But go ahead and take a dive in and give us the premise.
Killing Uncle Sam, I read it with Dr. Rodney Howard-Brown from Tampa. It's an historical critical study. It has over 1,000 footnotes, and there's a big difference between somebody who's quoting from the internet, somebody that's quoting from secondaries. This is almost all based on primary sources. So
yeah, fantastic.
First of all, it's a solid historical, and I have a PhD, as you said. I think all of my works and almost all my works are very, very heavily documented. And it's not a conspiracy theory, but this is going to sound like a conspiracy theory. What happened, Jason, is in 1877, a guy by the name of Cecil John Rhodes realized that because of the Industrial Revolution, that England had a surfeit of goods, that it could bring in supplies and materials from all over the world, that England had become the production giant of the universe. And he believed that the English were meant to rule the world. So what he did, now that this sounds once again kind of crazy, but it's actual historical fact. In 1877, he had this idea to create a secret society, a society of people like himself who were very wealthy, very well connected to the government, Masons, interested in the occult. Don't know what the real significance of that, but they were all very much interested in the occult. And he formed a secret society with Nathan Rothschild, who really had control of the Bank of England.
The Rothschilds, they've got a lot of history and a lot of net worth, that family.
They certainly do. People like Arthur Balfour, who became the Prime Minister of England, Alfred Milner, who became the governor of South Africa, Rudyard Kipling, who was, a leading poet and writer in England at that time. Lord Brett, who was the closest advisor to Queen Victoria, he formed a society. It had hundreds of members, and they were all, once again, very, very well connected, very wealthy, and very influential.
Yeah.
And because of this society, the first thing that they did was, Rhodes, of course, had an interest in South Africa. So he got together with Milner, and they instigated the Second Boer War. And because of that war, it proved that his society could control political affairs. Because of that war, Britain gained control of all of South Africa, the Dutch Free State, the Orange Free State, the Transvaal. They got all of South Africa because this society that Rhodes created instigated the war. This is all true.
Mm-hmm.
Once again, this group, it was called the Society of the Elect, and it transmogrified. It changed into something called the Round Table movement. It's separate branches of the Round Table were established in every part of the British Empire, in India, in Japan, in China, in Canada. But the primary branch was established in the United States. And Rothschild at that time, one of his associates, was J.P. Morgan. And with J.P. Morgan, a branch of this society was created in New York. And members of this society included Paul Warburg, who was related to the Rothschilds. He was the head of the Kuhn Loeb Bank, Andrew Carnegie, Andrew Mellon. Very wealthy, very influential.
All the big monopolists and industrialists here, no question.
All the big industrialists and bankers.
Sure. Yeah.
So what they did was they formed a society. They called it the Pilgrim Society, and it met at the Waldorf Astoria because Astor was also a member of this society. And from the society, from the Pilgrim Society, they realized, in working with the Rothschilds, since the Rothschilds controlled the Bank of England, which was a centralized bank, there was no centralized bank in the United States. So this group, this society, formed the Federal Reserve. They sent people to Jekyll Island, all associates of J.P. Morgan, by the way.
Yeah.
This was totally funded by Morgan.
Right.
They laid out the plans for the Federal Reserve System, which was headed by Aldrich, who was a member of the Rockefeller family. Once again, Morgan and Warburg, who was the brains behind it.
They were right in that room. I got to tell you something a little funny. I took my mastermind group to Jekyll Island, and we had our meeting in the Federal Reserve room, the exact place the whole thing was created. And we saw 96% of the value of the dollar evaporate in a century. So, and lots of boom bust cycles. And they were supposedly going to stop the boom bust cycles, but seems like we just keep having those.
Well, you see what happened. And I'm so glad you're aware of this because most people don't realize this.
Oh, yeah.
A group of private bankers and industrialists
they run the world.
Formed the Federal Reserve System. And first of all, the name is a misnomer. It's not federal. The Federal Reserve System is not controlled by the government, as you know.
Well, neither is Federal Express.
There you go. But they're private shareholders to the Federal Reserve, and a lot of them are international bankers to this day. In the beginning, they were all members of the Morgan family, Rothschilds, Rockefellers. The power of the Federal Reserve, that this little group now that met in Jekyll Island, supposedly in a duck hunting expedition, but what they really did was they created this centralized bank, which became instituted in 1913, as you know. At that point, the Federal Reserve gained complete control of the U.S. economy. The Federal Reserve could produce money, or it could cut back the money flow. It could cause a recession, or it could cause prosperity. It's the same thing. It maintains the same power to this day. It can establish the value of the dollar, or it can devalue the dollar. The power of the Federal Reserve over American citizens is unbelievable.
Yeah. Well, and over the world, over the entire world.
Exactly.
Really, too.
You got to realize. And so the Federal Reserve eventually created the Bank of International Settlements in Basel, Switzerland.
Yep.
And once again, that bank, which is controlled by the Federal Reserve, controls really the centralized banks throughout the planet.
Right.
So when we're talking about these things, people say, oh, this is really... No. This is not really boring, and this is not just history.
It's not boring. It affects your whole life. It affects everything you do. Every time you spend money, every time you earn money, it's like the oxygen in the air. It affects everything.
And the amazing thing about it is, just talking about the economic part of this story, in the 1930s under FDR, all the gold was confiscated from the American citizens. People don't know this anymore. It was illegal to own bars of gold. The government came in to your house, took all your gold.
Yeah, otherwise they'd put you in prison, and then they changed the value of it right after they did that. It's unbelievable. It's total scam.
And then, this is delightful to talk to you. And then not only that, but they took that gold. For a while, it was kept at the Federal Reserve in New York, where there's a vast vault, and at Fort Knox. But that gold's not there anymore.
Yeah.
It was all shipped to Basel. So that the Federal Reserve, since the 1930s, really has been producing money out of nothing, based on nothing, except what they estimate the value of the dollar to be.
Sure, yeah, of course.
That's economic enslavement. The American people do not control their own economy. They're enslaved. And that started but that's only a small part of the story, unfortunately.
Right. Yeah. But the monetary component of it is huge, obviously. So, most of my listeners know a lot about this because it's fascinating to me. And, we've had G. Edward Griffin on the show several times, and all of this stuff's great. He spoke at one of our events, and then Ron Paul spoke at the following year at another event. So,
two great men.
we hear about this stuff and we love it, and it's fascinating. But let's kind of fast forward, if we can, a little bit into
let's cut
modern
beyond that,
day.
because
So, like you talk about the demise of the United States of America. So maybe the world ends with a whimper, not a bang, as the saying goes. Where are we going? Like, what's going to happen? Are we going to see massive inflation, or what do you think's coming?
Okay, let me got to fill in some things. And
sure.
I'll be very quick.
Absolutely, go for it.
Number one, the same group that created the Federal Reserve created after World War I. They brought us into World War I, and at the end of World War I, they created the Council on Foreign Relations. The exact same players, the Morgans,
the CFR,
same players.
Sure.
And the Council on Foreign Relations, it's formed like the secret society of Cecil Rhodes, which is a circle within a circle within a circle. So the outer circle has no idea what the nucleus is doing. But the planners at the nucleus of the Council on Foreign Relations managed to take control of the U.S. State Department. That's another part of the story. The same people. Every Secretary of State we have had since the Franklin Delano Roosevelt administration, all the way up to Barack Obama, including, I think, Tillerson, who was a secret member. All of these people were members of the Council on Foreign Relations, came from the very heart of the Council on Foreign Relations. The Council on Foreign Relations, in turn, then gave birth to the World Bank, the International Monetary Fund, gave birth to the United Nations, and from the bowels of the Council on Foreign Relations came the CIA. People aren't aware of that.
Yeah. Mind-boggling, an intelligence agency. I know. It's power runs in very small circles.
Cutting back to your question, the end result of this whole society is, of course, economic hegemony, controlling all the wealth is natural resources.
Sure.
You know that.
Yep.
Wealth is not money. I mean, there's a big difference between, real money and wealth. Real wealth is based on natural resources. We're talking about oil. We're talking about natural gas. We're talking about uranium. We're talking about gold. And we're also talking about heroin, which is the third most valuable commodity in the world right now. So control of these things is really control of wealth. And if you look at anything that's taking place right now in the world today, a lot of the policies are instigated from this nucleus, this group that I'm saying that was in the heart of the Council on Foreign Relations and now constitutes the heart of organizations like the Trilateral Commission, all the same people. Mm-hmm. They can manipulate political events, political affairs, economic affairs to govern every aspect of what's taking place. And as a matter of fact, the only way you can really understand what's taking place in Central Asia, what's taking place in Iran right now with the withdrawal from the Iranian deal, what's taking place in Syria right now, what's taking place in Libya throughout Africa, is by following the money and following this attempt to seize the world's wealth by this cabal that was created all the way back in 1877.
Yeah, it's mind-boggling. But really, should we be surprised? I mean, of course, people want power. What's new, right? I mean, that's been that way throughout human history. Is this anything surprising, or is it just, it's just the biggest power grab ever, maybe,
No, I'm going to tell you what surprised me about it, Jason.
Yeah.
Once again, I worked for the FBI.
Right, yeah.
And I was a neocon. Most of the books that I wrote, and they were bestsellers.
Uh-huh.
And I made a lot of money doing this.
Yeah.
I believe that we had to really fight the Mujahideen. Mm-hmm. I was an investigative reporter for the major newspapers in the United States. Mm-hmm. And I went to places like Islamburg as an investigator. That's a paramilitary compound that was set up by some very radical Muslims in upper New York State. And I visited other compounds set up by the same organization, which was called Jamaat al-Fukra. They established paramilitary compounds throughout the United States. Now listen to this. At these compounds, they took all the people that are trained in these compounds are African Americans. They come from the prison system, where they are converted to Islam. Once they're released from prison and they're radicalized enough, they go to these training camps where they are trained with fully automatic weapons. They're trained in explosives. They're trained in obstacle courses. And when they're finished with this basic training at these camps like Islamburg and Red House and Compound in Commerce, Georgia, I've been to many of these compounds. I photographed them. They've been on Fox News. They're all my photographs.
Right. What
I found out, and I reported to the FBI, of course, reported to the state police, and I was wondering, why isn't anything done to shut down these places? Because when their training is complete, these jihadis are all sent, now get this, to Pakistan. And from Pakistan, they cross over into Afghanistan and join the Taliban. Now, I recorded all this. I documented all this. I went there. I talked to the people, the jihadis themselves. I went to interview the head of Jamaat al-Fuqra in New York. This is what I discovered. A guy by the name of Sheikh Mubarak Jalani set these camps up, over 35 of these camps throughout the United States, to train people for the jihad. This was back in 1979 to fight the Soviets in the Soviet-Afghan war. But the training went on, and it's continuing on to this day. And then I discovered that Jalani, the guy who was brought over here to set up these camps, came here and landed in the Andrews Air Force Base. I
Unbelievable. Yeah, you can't make this stuff up.
No. You have no idea how deep this is.
Yeah.
And not only that, he landed here in a military transport with blind Sheikh Hartman from Cairo, the guy that ended up being the instigator of the first bombing of the World Trade Center in 1993. So they arrived here at Andrews Air Force Base on a U.S. military transport planes. I have all this documented. He received funds to set up all these camps. And these camps are still operated by the CIA. Still. Wow. And these people are, once again, the jihadis, are joining the Taliban. And they come back from Pakistan with Pakistani and Afghan wives. I've met them. That was the first revelation where I realized something is really amiss here in the government. The second thing that opened my eyes, that dropped the scales from my eyes, was I was investigating a guy by the name of Fethullah Gulen, who lives in Salisbury, Pennsylvania. He has madrasas, Islamic schools throughout the United States. And the same schools extend throughout Central Asia. This guy has been called the most dangerous Islamist on planet Earth. He is attempting to create what he calls the new Islamic world order. And what he's trying to do is unite all of Central Asia, all these stand countries, Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan, Kazakhstan, Azerbaijan, all these stand countries into this new Islamic world order where all these peoples who share a Turkish culture become radicalized and part of this, what they call the new Islamic world order, this vast conquering of Central Asia. Fethullah Gulen was also brought here by the CIA. He has $50 billion in assets.
This is insane. I mean, the infrastructure for this stuff goes so deep and so big. But I want to talk a little bit more about like the more immediate. I mean, of course, this radical Islam is very scary. I get it.
Wait. There's nothing more immediate. This is not the past. This is happening right now.
I don't deny that. But what I'm saying is that for most people, their day-to-day life is impacted more about the economy and money and inflation and things like that. So I'd like to just circle back to that a little bit because we started off with the Federal Reserve stuff. The terrorism stuff is super scary, but most people look at that as a little bit far off, right? For better or worse. Okay. What about the economic component of this? I mean, what can people expect in the future? Are we looking at a future where the dollar is going to be debased more? How does Trump play into it? He seems like a maverick, obviously. Is he not part of it? I mean, is he an outsider?
Okay.
Tell us about that. Yeah.
I'm not making myself clear about this.
Yeah.
What's happening is, you got to understand, when I was just talking about what's taking place with the CIA is controlled by the same people who are controlling the economy. And what they're doing, you see, what I'm talking about, what's taking place in Afghanistan and Pakistan is something that impacts everybody economically because it's all about money. It's a struggle for the natural resources.
Of course it is.
Unless, Jason, you realize the value of the Caspian Sea and why everything, all the wars that are taking place, everything that's taking place right now.
Well, when you get to finance both sides of the same war, you got a pretty good business for a central banker, right? Yeah. No question that it's about money. How does it trickle down, though? Like, is it inflationary in the way it trickles down, or is it just a resource grab? I mean, obviously it's just a resource grab, but tell us more about that.
The way it trickles down is this, and you see it. And it's a vision of Cecil Rhodes. What he wanted is to have people more and more and more enslaved to the state because he realized, and they all realize this, that they're forming a global entity here.
Oh, sure.
It's not American sovereignty. It's all about control of the world's resources. What they realize is the labor force is stationary, but the capital moves. Marx knew that. So our labor force right now, the people right now think, oh, we're enjoying. No, we're not enjoying prosperity. We're not. If you're starting out like my wife and I, two of us have to work to make ends meet. Even at that point, we're always in debt. We never get out. That's enslavement. We never experience the type of prosperity that our forefathers knew. We don't know that. And more and more, we're relying on the state. The state has become the church. All of our needs, healthcare needs, everything else, we're dependent on the state. This was all the plan of Cecil Rhodes. All his plan. And behind the state, you see, the state would be funded by taxing you, taking everything that you own. You could say, oh, I'm really doing well, but you're taxed right, left, and sideways.
Oh, sure. It's unbelievable. Yeah.
And you're enslaved, and so you buy a bigger but that's more and more enslavement. Credit card, everybody's dying in debt. Look at the kids getting hundreds and hundreds of thousands, but it's all part of it. You see, they're more and more reliant on the state, and the state is controlled by these people. So you talk about Donald Trump right now. He's being dragged into that situation in Iran by his nose. I mean, please. I mean, and it's all about money.
Yeah, it is. Any action steps for the listener?
Yeah.
What can we do?
That's why everyone has. First of all, I'm not making any money in this book. All the proceeds from killing Uncle Sam go to the River School of Government to train people to know as much as you know, so the people are aware who the enemy is and how to address it. Look, there are steps that people can do. This is not hopeless. Mm-hmm. Number one, as you know, audit the Fed.
Obviously. That would seem like such an obvious, reasonable request. But hey, in today's world, you can't have that.
Yeah, but what? Hey,
it's absurd. Yeah, of course you should audit them. Yeah, no, obviously, yeah.
You spoke about Ron Paul, and you talk about Edward Griffin. I mean, I know that they would totally agree with what I'm saying. Yeah. Number one, and Ron Paul was calling for this constantly.
Oh, sure.
Secondly, in the endless wars. What the hell are we doing in a war? An endless war. The Taliban never attacked us.
Well, the war is even worse. I think it's an even bigger, I think the war conspiracy, I mean, there's so many layers to that.
It's not a conspiracy.
Right? Yeah. I would even ask, what's wrong with the word conspiracy? I mean, there's lots of conspiracies. So what? That doesn't mean you're some kind of wacko.
But usually what people
conspiracies every day. They're all over the place.
I was talking to a guy on a radio host the other day, and they started talking about the secret society of Cecil Rhodes, which is a historical fact. And he immediately says, conspiracy theorist.
No, I get that people use that to marginalize people, but I don't think there's anything marginal about it. I mean, seriously, the current day America was a conspiracy against England.
Oh, yeah.
So what? I mean, you get it? I mean, I don't think conspiracies are necessarily bad. They're all over. Of course, it's just two people talking about doing something.
But, I'm calling for, I think that first of all, we have over 1,000 military bases in 130 countries.
It's ridiculous. I mean, yeah.
It's ridiculous.
It's the game of empire.
174 bases in Germany, 113 in Japan.
Yeah.
I mean, it's nuts.
Of course it's nuts.
So, I mean, the number one, in the endless wars, if Donald Trump or anyone, I hate all politicians. War, I think, has to be declared by Congress. Let's stop these.
For the executive wars. Yeah, right. Yeah.
Audit the Fed, absolve the national debt. Most of that debt we owe to ourselves. Mm-hmm. Yeah. From one agency to another. Absolve us.
Yeah. It's a totally wacky, mega complex. It's just a crazy thing. But how do we do that? I mean, just because we're talking about it doesn't mean it's going to happen. The powers that be are so entrenched. I mean...
Well, first of all, they are entrenched. But the only hope, and I'm not by nature, I'm an Irish drunk. I'm not by nature, I'm Eugene O'Neill. So I'm not basically an optimist like Rodney Howard-Browne is. Yeah. So I think that if people are educated and they're aware, there's at least hope.
Yeah.
But if people are just, remain in the darkness and remain gnomes, I mean, there's no hope at all.
Yeah.
But at least there's a spark of enlightenment with education. They have to become aware of the system.
Absolutely. That's the first step. No question about it. It seems like a lot more people are aware. I mean, when I would do seminars 12 years ago, and I'd start talking about the Fed and the way inflation is manipulated through hedonic substitution weighting, people kind of looked at me kind of quizzically like, what really? Is this what goes on? How money is lent into existence? Nobody really got it. But now I talk about that stuff, and it seems like, you walk down the street and you see a guy fixing an air conditioner, and he knows about the scam. I don't know. It seems like there's some more awareness. Thankfully,
and getting into economics, let's really look at economics and national sovereignty, because a national sovereignty is totally dependent on economics. Yeah. First thing that you need to do is you need to protect your labor force. Yeah. And you can only do that with tariffs. I know that that's a dirty word.
Yeah. No. So you would agree with Trump on that you got to have some tariffs. I think so too. I think that I want to tell the world I believe I'm a libertarian, right? But I don't think you can have totally open, pillage, overrun free trade when you don't have equally yoked societies.
How can you and I compete with somebody who can live in India at 13 cents an hour?
And they can pollute the rivers, and they can hire people for no money and make them work, 18 hours a day, and there's no child labor laws. They can, pollute the air left and right. I mean, you can't compete with that in the U.S. Of course you can from an intellectual and a design perspective. There's all kinds of innovations that come out of the U.S., of course, but it is there's still good old hard labor. There are still people that work with their hands, and some things have not been automated yet, folks. Those American jobs have just been shipped over shore, and I tell you, Trump is going to bring a lot of them back.
And we're still the number one consumer nation in the world. Yeah. We're the consumers.
Right. Yeah.
So if we had tariffs and produced our own goods, fine. Industries could still be making a profit because we're the consumers. We don't need to consume goods from China or from India or from Bangladesh. I mean, it's absurd. Yeah. So, these things are remedies that can be taken if we train people. That's why the School of Government, I think, that where the proceeds for this book are going. If we can train some people to get into government to make a difference, I think that might be...
You know what's interesting about what you said about the consumerism issue, too? I'd like to do some shows on this. I never have. I've mentioned it a few times, but I need maybe an expert on this. But, from my studies, Americans before really the 40s, maybe, they were not this massive consumer society. People were sort of, and you could certainly argue that consumerism has some benefits. It creates some progress, right? And I agree with that. But, people were sort of content. It was Bernays. It was Edward Bernays that changed advertising and changed and created propaganda. And really that was the sort of the beginning, from what I understand, of the corporatocracy as it exists today. And then we had the madman on Madison Avenue and so forth that came in after that. And it's just become a very different world. It's like people have a house full of goods that are made cheap in China, but they don't have a job. It's a weird scenario we're in. It really is.
Yeah. Before 1965, we had a quota system. People don't want to talk about this either. It sounds racist. It sounds bigoted.
Tell us about that.
That was our history.
What do you mean, a quota system? An affirmative action? That was not affirmative action. What do you mean, a quota?
Oh, no. Listen, this is something niche. Before 1965, America had a quota system that was instituted in 1924. By that time, great mass waves of immigrants had come.
Oh, an immigration quota. That's what you're talking about.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
And so the immigration quota was based on the fact that the people who were here in 1924 had a common heritage. 96, 97% came from Western Europe. Yeah. They had a common heritage, a common history.
Yeah, right.
Common background.
Yeah, now everything's been so overrun by peoples of every part of the world that nobody has any sense of community anymore. And, people will say that's racist and this and that. But,
nation is always united by blood. Yeah. It is. And that's what a nation was, by borders and blood.
If you think of it, what are the ingredients of a country, right? What do you need to have the definition of a country? Well, you need probably a common currency, a common language, a common set of laws, and borders that are respected. And, countries have borders. Sorry, that's the way the world works.
Yeah, it goes deeper than that. You have to have a common heritage, too. Yeah. You have to have a common heritage, even a common religion. I mean, that was all part of America.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. The way the Bill of Rights went down, sort of, I don't know.
Well, we're talking in terms of economics.
Yeah, right.
Listen, you cannot have the type of immigration system that we have with people coming from third world countries without skills, with our labor force in very bad shape, despite the fact that people are saying, oh, we're better off now than we were maybe 10 years ago with the recession of 2008.
Right, but we're not better off necessarily than we were in the 50s, for example.
People are not making good money.
Yeah,
They're not making enough to make ends meet. And at the same time, when you're flooding the country with people with little skills who require governmental assistance, you're not doing the country a favor.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We should take care of our own. We should have even a healthcare system where we can provide some benefits. We need labor unions. We need all these things.
The hollowing out of westernized countries around the world is no secret. I mean, it's happened in, Europe has just been overrun, Scandinavia, Europe, and it seems like they've all done it voluntarily. They say that I saw this cleric on TV saying that Belgium will have Sharia law in 10 years.
Yeah.
I mean, it is mind-boggling how quick these changes occur.
It's mind-boggling. Let me tell you something else that's mind-boggling. Islam is the second largest religion in the United States. That's by Cornell University, by far and away. There are twice as many, according to Cornell, Muslims in the United States right now than Jews.
Well, that's crazy, yeah. But, it's funny, like, how it seems like people are, they're just sort of cooperating in their own demise in some ways.
People.
If you would argue, first of all, that that's demise, but,
you're talking about
I'm kind of going with it, yeah.
Bernays discovered what people can be very, very easily manipulated.
Yeah.
You can change their basic belief system within a matter of months. That's been proven by our media, by what's taking place right now. Just take a look that just a few years ago, people like Hillary Clinton would speak out against same-sex marriage.
Mm-hmm.
Look at how our belief system can be changed just by the media within a couple of years.
The Clintons put their finger up and sense which way the wind's going. They do that. Billy did it years ago.
The American people, too. It's the American people. And Bernays knew that, and certainly people that we're talking about who control the monetary system are very much aware of it. The people can be manipulated to believe in free trade, manipulated to believe that they have to have this massive defense organization where we have bases throughout creation. An increase in military spending is a salubrious thing. People can be conditioned to believe that, and they do believe that.
Yeah.
The war that's really important to fight these wars, they can be conditioned. Even when they're aware later that they've been lied to, they're still conditioned.
Yeah.
They were lied to in Vietnam, at the Persian Gulf War. They were lied to by Bill Clinton about the massacre of the ethnic Albanians. They were lied by George H.W. Bush about Saddam Hussein removing babies from incubators and throwing them on the floor. They were lied to by George W. Bush about the weapons. Even when they realize they've been lied to, they're duped again.
Yeah, it's crazy. It really is. Give out your website. Tell people where they can find out more.
I'm wise enough as an old Irishman not to want to be bothered by the vast majority of the people out there. So I don't have my own way. I had one, but I no longer. What I would want them to do is go to killingunclesambook.com.
killingunclesambook.com. Okay, good.
Right. I would encourage them to read the book, to disseminate the book to all their friends and family, and if they're teachers, to use the book in their classrooms.
Yeah.
It's a study book. There's a study guide with it. I think it'll open their eyes.
You won't be allowed to use that in a public school, I'll tell you that much.
No. That's
it doesn't fit the state-sponsored narrative in the brainwashing school.
And I mean, that's another thing we didn't even talk about, the influence of foundations on higher education and on education itself.
Yeah.
That's a very, very, and of course on the world economy.
Yeah, no question about it. Good stuff. Well, Paul, thank you so much for joining us today. Appreciate having you on.
Okay, buddy. Take care.
Thank you so much for listening. Please be sure to subscribe so that you don't miss any episodes. Be sure to check out the show's specific website and our general website, hartmanmedia.com, for appropriate disclaimers and terms of service. Remember that guest opinions are their own, and if you require specific legal or tax advice or advice in any other specialized area, please consult an appropriate professional. And we also very much appreciate you reviewing the show. Please go to iTunes or Stitcher Radio or whatever platform you're using and write a review for the show. We would very much appreciate that. And be sure to make it official and subscribe so you do not miss any episodes. We look forward to seeing you on the next episode.